The wheel of time turns, and ages come and go, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again. In one age, called the Third Age by some, an age yet to come, an age long past, a wind rose in the mountains of mist. The wind was not the beginning. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the wheel of time, but it was a beginning. The Wheel of Time turns and podcasts come and go. Welcome to WOTCast, a Wheel of Time book club, and now a Wheel of Time watch club. We are reading through Robert Jordan's epic fantasy series and watching Amazon's Wheel of Time TV show adaptation, which just premiered early last night. We are very excited to be digging into the new adaptation and talking about the episodes we have seen so far. I'm Caleb Wimble, and with me is Katie Jarvis.
Hello.
Oh, I didn't catch anything.
Hello.
There we go. It's just the two of us for the minute. Keely is out sick today, and Dan will be joining, I believe, a little late. He has not had the chance to catch the show yet, which went up early last night. So it is just going to be initially Katie and me talking about our thoughts on the first two episodes, although three have premiered unexpectedly. I was on Monday supposed to see an early pre-screening in theaters, as was Dan on the other coast, and despite showing up half an hour early in his case and an hour early in my case, we did not make it in. We had tickets reserved and everything, but there was a lot of turnout lining up hours early to get in to see it in theaters. So, it was not so bad waiting, in my case, until last night when we were surprised by the early release on Thursday. And which looks like, just for our fans' knowledge, it looks like that will be the case going forward. That Amazon, when they say that their shows premiere on Friday, they mean 12 a.m. Friday, Greenwich Mean Time, like actual Greenwich Mean Time +0, which means that's 4 p.m. Thursday for those of us on the U.S. Pacific Coast, and Thursday at 7 p.m. for those on the East Coast. So those are the time slots if you want to keep up with the show on Thursday nights or whenever else you see it. You can find us at WOTCast.net and support the show at patreon.com/WOTCast. Your support means a lot. Even $2 at the Two Rivers tier helps. However, if you join us on Patreon at the $5 Tarvalin tier, you will be a part of the White Tower, in which you'll get access to special bonus episodes where we talk about things like Wheel of Time, short stories, graphic novels, video games, failed TV pilots, and Dune. We wrapped up our Part 2 Dune conversation on Denis Villeneuve's series, which will be up by the time you're listening to this episode. So as of now, if you sign up to the Patreon at the $5 tier or higher, you will immediately get access to 2 bonusodes, which are a lot of fun, and you will continue to get more in the future. Email us questions, comments, and corrections via contact@wotcast.net with the subject line questions. We'll answer them here on the show. For those unfamiliar, The Wheel of Time is a how-to guide for teens looking to backpack their way across the European countryside while dodging overzealous pyramid scheme proselytizers and singing for their supper. But before we get into where we left off in Book 1, Eye of the World, Katie, the show is out. We both saw at least some of it, 2 episodes. What did you think?
Yay. Well, it was really exciting. I was trying to think if I've ever so closely read something and then watched the show, and I don't think I've ever done it in this proximity. So it was exciting for that reason. Let's see. My initial impressions were that I think they did a really good job making the plot cohesive, especially in that first episode.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was interesting how there were some things that we didn't find out through most of the first book that were revealed in that first episode.
And in the first couple seconds of the first episode even, right?
Yeah. And, but the choices seemed like they were done for a good reason, to make the viewer understand the scope of the story a little bit more. So I felt like I was for those changes, but it was just interesting to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought the acting was really good. The characters seemed to embody who I felt they were in the story. So that was a strong point for me. What did you think of that?
Yeah, I'm really sold on this cast so far. I really had no complaints about any of the casting until the third episode, which you haven't gotten to yet. So we'll get to that one a little later. With a conspicuously absent character in the first two episodes. Yeah, I don't know if you were as surprised as I was that we got no Tom Maryland yet.
Yeah, I was waiting for him, and then I was like, maybe he's just gonna come in later, but he wasn't there. So yeah, that was interesting, and I'm trying to think through the plot, like how will the plot work without him. But maybe there's more surprises in store in that regard. So there was that, and there was a lot of changes with Nynaeve's presence in that initial episode. I thought too, which was interesting.
Yeah, it changes, and I think we suspected this reading, it changes so much not being anchored to Rand's perspective throughout the events of the first 5 chapters, because I think that's about what get covered, plus some in the first episode. Like, it really, especially, I mean, getting Moraine so intensely in Land changes the most, especially given that they're not hiding anything and there's no mystery around their arrival. They, by the end of the first episode, Moraine has told the kids, well, they're not even kids because everybody got aged up in this one. She's told the 4 Two Rivers young adults that one of them is the reincarnation of the dragon reborn, which was, I think you had some sense of that maybe things were going. I don't know. What was your reaction to that, or to was that a revelation at that point?
I don't think it was a revelation, but it was so direct and like so upfront. And in the whole like we're at page 576 in my copy of the book, and nothing has been that direct up until this point. So that, yeah, it was, but I do think it adds like a sense of cohesiveness to the journey for the viewer to know that up front. So I understand why they did it. Like, it makes the mission very clear.
Yeah, which I think there's pretty good sense in that, since we don't really get an antagonist making a direct appearance in the pilot necessarily. I mean, we have the Trollocs obviously, but we don't really know until she says that what the Dark One's deal is, or like what the interest in the village is. And like you said, I feel like that's a good thing to anchor audiences in the stakes of all this. I think like you said, I think most of the streamlining changes they did throughout the episode, I was both impressed with the things that they streamlined to get through so much, and pretty much on board with almost all of it. I'm trying to think through some of the biggest changes. It is interesting that we open with the Red Aja hunting down a channeler at the beginning, because that gives you a very different framing, and it's a male channeler that they're hunting down, and she sort of gives it an ominous this power was not meant for you, it belongs to women thing, before doing something to him that he starts screaming, and then we get into the not quite the title sequence yet, but on with the episode. So I almost feel like it is framing immediately the Red Aja as being a more present set of their own. I felt like they were being framed pretty villainously in that shot, like, especially when you don't know what's going on, if your viewer who hasn't read the book, right? Like, all you know is that there's some poor guy that they're chasing, and then apparently torturing because he has access to some power he's not supposed to. So that was an interesting framing there to start. And then Moraine's watching it, right, in Lan, and we immediately learn that she is hunting down young people of either gender of around 20 years old, right, in this one, instead of 19, I guess, just to make that clear. But Egwene is also 20 in this one, and I guess this is the biggest question. They are certainly setting it up that any of these 4 could be not just ta'veren, but the dragon. And the biggest question is how much they are willing to change in this. Is it possible they will change who is ultimately the dragon, which would be enormous. I don't know if I don't know what you think based on where we are in the book so far, what your sense was, what they were doing with that. Is this just to mess with people who haven't read them, maybe?
I thought, yeah, it was just to maybe give us a sense. I mean, it was interesting because I was thinking how in the book, we don't even exactly know why Moraine and Lan showed up in Two Rivers in the first place. So in the show, it's very clearly framed. She was like, "This is why I have gone here." So that was really direct. And yeah,
is it the first episode or second episode she talks about the old blind Aes Sedai who had the prophecy that she alone heard?
Was it when she was on horseback, when she was giving that whole speech? Is that when that happened or no?
They're on horseback a lot, so I remember it. So yeah, it could be. But
Yeah,
I couldn't remember
not
if that's
sure.
episode 1 or not.
I'm not sure, but yeah, I did think, that scene with the Aes Sedai kind of attacking that man, I thought it also did another thing of setting up like the gender politics right away. Like in the first episode, I thought it was very clear that like this is a world in which the women can wield the power and the men are dangerous with the power. So I mean, that's clear in the book too, but I think that they like went out of their way to kind of punch that a little bit.
Yeah.
And I also thought, what did you think of the white cloaks? Because in the same way that the red Aja were maybe kind of made villainous, I thought that the white cloaks were made like clearly villainous. Maybe
Yes.
more so than in the book.
Because we open with not one of the normal Children of the Light, but one of the questioners who even the other Children of the Light don't like because they are the zealous interrogators who may at any time decide even another white cloak is potentially a dark friend. And they're like the most powerful. They're kind of like the black ops of the white cloaks, and we're set up. Are they burning an Aes Sedai at the stake right away?
Yes.
Is that the very first time we see them?
Yeah, and he has those rings on, so we know that he's kind of murderous, and yeah.
Oh yeah, he's collecting great serpent rings from the quote unquote witches he finds. It was interesting. I feel like they've done something else by even changing their costumes. Like the white cloaks in the book, they wear kind of like, they wear basically regular armor, like regular plate mail, and they just have like a white cloak draped over with the golden sunburst on, and they're kind of, I feel like they're made to look sort of like crusaders, or Knights Templar sort of thing. In this, their robes to me make them look much, much more like the religious order they are, as much as they are like a paramilitary order. They've got like these, almost. I mean, they don't look like any real religious robes, but there's something like almost nun-like or something about having those, right? As a costume, sets them apart even more. I guess the biggest character change that really took me and Eric, my partner, aback as we were watching was Perrin as a wife.
Yeah.
And not for very long.
That was so sad and tragic. And it changes, what we're always talking in the book. The three males have this like pure adolescence to them in that they're like very inexperienced with women.
Yes.
And they have kind of like a naivete there. And this really changes that. Their kind of family structures that they're given certainly adds something to the character, but also changes your perception of the character. So I thought with Perrin, he was just much more like grown up and assured, and had this tragic event happen, which is just different.
Yeah. And I feel like it was the moment she appeared on screen, or the moment. Actually, no, it was even before. It's Layla, right? Is it Layla or Tayla? Or Kayla? It's that something
sure.
Ayla, I think. It's mentioned in the tavern in the first scene with the two rivers folk that Perrin has a wife, and immediately Eric and I turned to each other and we're like, "Oh God, did they give him a wife just to kill her?" Like that was immediately the first thought, like that. And so I did feel a little iffy about like there's something slightly. I mean, this is like the grungy side of writing, like the kind of grossness of like introducing a new. There's something dirty feeling about just throwing in a new character who does not exist in the book just for the sake of killing her to give Perrin more pathos, but by the same token, I agree that does give him much more to work with, and to feel like there's much more sense of why they're fleeing, what they're leaving behind, and some of that is not added. It's just stuff we don't get in Eye of the World at the beginning because we're stuck in Rand's perspective. Like I don't think in Eye of the World yet we have learned all that stuff about Matt and his family and a real sense of his relationship with his sisters and his drunk mother and philandering father, which I don't think we get until Matt perspective chapters, which are either really late in Eye of the World or are in like the book 2 flashbacks from the two rivers, because Rand is just kind of this oblivious dunce in in the book for the most part, right? And he's also feels more like a child, like we've said, who's just oblivious to a lot of things.
I have to say the characters were more likable to me in the show, which so I suppose that's kind of what they were doing, trying to give them like a bit of depth and resonance, and all of them were a bit more likable. And then of course I was expecting them to kind of bump up any love story they could, so I feel like between Egwene and Rand, that was just much more upfront and intimate, and like, you know, it definitely wasn't that way. It was much more innocent and subtle in the book.
Oh yeah, and the thought of them like just and you know, there's a lot of tension set up between them in the show, which I think is there in the book, but it is more present here because there's more of that physical sense of the relationship they have, but the fact that they just, you know, have sex like at the end of this fraught first night, that'd be like such a scandal in the version of them we've read in Eye of the World, right? Like if anybody in the village found out, but it does feel like a totally acceptable to me Hollywoodization kind of thing to get you like more invested in this relationship that is immediately going through turmoil. And yeah, even just the performances to me gave us much more of the sense of they do love each other, but they're already starting to go down different paths even before Moraine shows up, kind of way that in the book just takes forever to be communicated, that sense, because Rand just has such a, you know, like we've said, kind of feels more like a 13-year-old's like temerity and refusal to really engage with his feelings about Egwene or to like really, and people put so many cards on the tables here. They were doing the thing that drove several of us crazy throughout the book, right? Of just telling people stuff. Like they tell, is it episode 2 that they just straight up tell Moraine about their dreams, and she's telling them things that she hasn't told them in the books. Everybody's just putting cards on the table much, much earlier here.
I felt I had like a moment of irritation where they just explicitly say what their dreams were to her, because, and I have a feeling they're going to hide future dreams from her because she said, make sure you tell me when you have more dreams. So that led me to believe that they're not going to.
Once Baalsmon actually offers them something or starts telling them specific things.
But I was a little bit like, oh, okay, well, it's just coming right out there.
Which makes it all really, really fast. Especially episode 1 to me felt like I just really liked this first episode. I thought it was exciting. It was establishing stakes. It was beautiful. I forget. Wait, is this I forget. Is this Hungary or the Czech Republic? I'm suddenly going blank on where this was shot. In Czech, right? Which I had no idea had mountains this huge and gorgeous. And I was wondering, like, is this partly the Alps? Like, these are like the beautiful vistas of the valley that Two Rivers is in. And we're just booking through plot. We get to see much more of the Trolloc showing up. And I know we're jumping all over here because I think our thoughts are jumping all over. And mine certainly are. And we get dynamics that we won't see explored till much, much later in the Eye of the World, like the fact that we get all the, like you said, the Nynaeve stuff early on, and we get immediately the Moraine and Nynaeve, and even this admission of why Nynaeve has like this disdain for the White Tower based on her mentor and everything. And even like a moment of ambiguity about whether Nynaeve is going, because her birth is kind of uncertain as well, sort of like Rand's, and she is also maybe a foundling who was brought to the Two Rivers. But at the end of that, Moraine ascertains that she's too old to be one of the prophecy ones, that she's like 25, 26, something around there. But they have that conversation in the sacred pools area, and we see so much more of like Nynaeve's role here in the village and the women's circle, because they open with they've sort of combined Egwene's adult ceremony, her getting the braid, with that anecdote about her falling down a river and touching the power for the first time, which here is Nynaeve pushing her into the river, which was very funny to me.
Yeah, no, it was interesting because the characters of Egwene and Nynaeve and their tensions, like Nynaeve's tension with Moraine, was much more understandable, where there were like specific parts in the book where Nynaeve is kind of annoying me because I'm like, why is she being so obstinate? But here it's much more clear and it makes perfect sense. And yeah, in a sense, the first 2 episodes here did like, they're like the exact opposite of Dune in that they didn't take like this slow getting to know the characters approach. They just like threw us into the plot and got as much in there as humanly possible. And I mean, I think it did a pretty good job at that.
And I only started to feel that we might be going a little too fast. I think in episode 2, like all of episode 1, I thought that was like the perfect pacing for this, like, you know, to really get people grounded in this, get the inciting event and everything all by the end of the first hour, to have this, what I thought was a pretty spectacular for TV display of the power when Moiraine is fighting the Trollocs in the village. Another significant plot change there, where Moiraine is wounded by what looked like a pretty serious hatchet to her chest from one of the Trollocs to set up that she is also being afflicted by the Sheol Ghoul infection, and that this is like this ticking clock that she is going to die if she can't get treatment from another Aes Sedai, because she does heal Tam, as in the book, and establishes that nothing can heal a Sheol Ghoul blade except the one power. So that's an interesting dynamic they've introduced where I know you didn't get to the 3rd yet, but by the end of the 2nd, I think she's already like looking a lot paler and weaker and like having trouble going on.
Is that not I didn't remember from the book that Moiraine couldn't heal herself. Is that true in the books as well, that an Aes Sedai can't heal themselves, they need another Aes Sedai to heal them?
That's true, yeah. I don't think she got wounded, but that did come up. I think in the context of she couldn't take the fatigue from herself.
Right.
Remember, we had that conversation about like you can't do much to yourself with the one power because it's like trying to lift yourself up by your bootstraps or something. Like, is this not because of the way the flows work and how you're reaching out and like as extensions of yourself out into the world, you can't really do things to yourself in the same way, which sort of makes sense. I don't know. What we will learn more about the power, although we've learned, I feel like, more about the power in these first couple episodes of the show than we have at the 3/4 point of Eye of the World where we are in the book, because we've been out, you know, we're never in Moraine's perspective really in that one so far.
I was wondering what you thought of the fantasy elements. I had like an interesting discussion with my husband because he was like, I was expecting it to look more realistic, like Game of Thrones, because they put so much money into it. But I was like, well, this is like high fantasy, so it's not, you know, Game of Thrones has some fantastic elements, I guess, like later on, or, you know, with the White Walkers and things like that, but it's not like high fantasy, and that's just never going to look totally real because it's, I don't know. So yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah. I think I had a sense that I wish they had waited longer before showing us the weaves, because the first couple times we see somebody use the one power, we see the effect, but we don't see like air flowing around in like sort of, you know, like kind of cartoony looking strands of air or water or fire. We just see like, you know, I forget if it's a healing that we initially see like flesh rippling back together kind of. And I think they have sort of established this in the show through camera perspective, but have not really made it clear for an audience who doesn't know, I think, that only people who can wield the power can see the power in that way, can see like the flows of air and water and fire. Other people would not see all those, like when Moiraine is like tearing all the bricks out of the inn, which she like destroys in this one to make like rock catapults. I think everybody else would just see it more like the Force in Star Wars, of those rocks like pooling out and hurling. I do wish they had kept that longer, because I think it is more subtle to not show us like the sort of Avatar, the Last Airbender element of similarity of which is, I think, what this feels closest to now. And that's, you know, when I saw Avatar for the first time as a kid, I was like, oh, this is a lot like Wheel of Time magic, especially once Aang learns to wield the elements together, because that's basically what Aes Sedai do. Like everything they do with the power is some combination of different flows, which again, not something we've gotten to in Eye of the World yet. We don't know how Moraine's abilities work, or we know she calls down lightning, but we don't know that she does that by sending up flows of air and water and fire into the upper atmosphere and weaving them together in such a way that it causes a catalyst reaction and lightning comes shooting down, because she hasn't explained any of that to Egwene yet at this point. They've just done the stone heating thing in the second episode. So yeah. Oh, you know what? I will say the one thing effect-wise, I really like the look of the Trollocs in this. I think they look pretty good and pretty convincing.
They were good. They were. Yeah. I definitely felt that way. They were imaginative. Like they weren't like, I don't feel like, oh, this is a creature I've seen before necessarily. And they were fierce and intense, and there was so many of them. Like you really got the magnitude of the kind of attack they were under. I agree with that.
Really brutal too. Like, I mean, the book is brutal in a lot of those violent scenes, but I thought that part was maybe more heightened than Game of Thrones, but the most Game of Thrones in terms of like the consequences of like every weapon stroke, or like, the murdering of people in the village, or one of my favorite scenes of when a whole bunch of the villagers team up with pitchforks, like 12 of them, to take down one Trolloc, and are just like viciously stabbing and slamming and everything they can to get the thing down to the ground. It felt weightier, I think, than necessarily when Moraine's doing all her CGI stuff throughout those scenes.
Yeah, I thought that I actually liked that part because it made the townspeople not seem like defenseless. They fought back and they were strong. And then in the second episode, when we get that whole story that she tells of the origin of their people, and it's people with strength and hardiness, it kind of matches with the fact that they fought back and
sing for my Netherren, and they have the Two Rivers folk know the song that she then tells them the story of. That was it. It's an interesting choice so far. I think most of the music, a lot more of which is in episode 3, but even in the first 2 episodes, the music is not like really leaning into the Irish flavor of the novel so much, and the Two Rivers flavor. I feel like, and even the aesthetics of the Two River, they're a little less Irish and a little more Scandinavian, maybe a little, to me, like the style of the houses and everything. They're a little more Nordic looking, the lodges as I saw them. But then their songs, like that song in particular, the Sing for Manetherem, had elements to me of like a Negro spiritual from the 1800s. Like that seemed like more the influence it was going for. I don't know if you thought the same thing of the music.
I did. I had that same thought, and I was like, it's interesting because in my head, I didn't picture it that way, but I liked it. I mean, I think it fit really well in the scene, and I liked what it kind of invoked.
Mm-hmm. I guess I won't say the thing about the episode 3 music, since you haven't gotten
you
to
can
it yet.
if you want. You can if you want.
No, because I'm interested to get there's a bunch of musical scenes, and I'm interested to hear your fresh take on each of them. So I won't say anything about those. Other things about episode 1 and the battles before we're too far past them. One thing I really like that we don't get in the book, because we don't see the Two Rivers fight in the book, is the way that Moraine and Lan fight together and sort of combine his swordplay with her weaving. I feel like we get a lot more of the intimacy and the closeness of the relationship between the two of them here. And to me, that was a pretty cool way of showing it visually, where she is like weaving like shields of air around them as Lan is like flipping over her, and as she is working on like powering some big thing she's about to do. And he's just like keeping the circle around her as safe as he can. And he'll like jump into the weaves of air that she is kind of boosting him. And then he slices through a Trolloc with it. I thought that was a pretty cool way of visualizing beyond the much more obviously intimate scene of them in the bathtub together, where she heats the water with the one power.
Yeah, but even I liked the sense of their intimacy. Even that bath scene, I thought it wasn't over the top. Like you just got almost like a old married couple that like you just got this sense that they'd been together for a long time and they had each other's backs. And the same thing with that fight scene. I did notice that because we see the Two Rivers attack before we see Rand and his dad get attacked in their house, that kind of changes up the perspective a little bit. Like it makes the attack on their like little farmhouse less impactful because we had already seen the attack going on in the town. So that, in my mind, that scene was so much more downplayed, the scene with Rand and his father. But it just makes sense of the chronological order of the show.
Yeah, I felt exactly the same thing. And I guess it seems like a worthy trade-off because it does make sense to interrupt the dance. That seems like cinematically the bigger thing to interrupt than suddenly just the door bursting open. And I also wonder if that scene would not have been as powerful either because, and this was a more subtle change, it's not, everything's not covered in snow here. There's no sign of the lingering late winter and Rand and Tam trudging back through the snow to their house and the wind howling, and they're like in this cozy house against the fire and having their soup, and then the door just opens in a howling wind of snow and this monster standing there. I feel like there's less of the impact to that and less of the impact to doing stuff with like Rand. Like we don't see any of Rand like creeping or like crawling from the farm back to the house or attaching Tam to the makeshift carriage or hauling him back through the snow to Emmons Field. Maybe, I wonder if just on some level, because it wouldn't have been as exciting without the late winter element in here. Everything is like beautiful and autumnal here, kind of, right? It's like, looks like we're just changing into fall almost.
Yeah, that was an interesting choice for them to not make it as wintry. I think there were two elements also in that scene that I kind of just like my mind missed were one, when the Trolloc kind of speaks to Rand, because that's an interesting aspect, and maybe they chose not to do that because it wouldn't have come off right with the creature that they've created. I could see it maybe being cheesy or something. But the other thing is, and I'm sure this will have to get woven in at some other point, but that's the first time where we find out, where we get the mumblings of Tam that he is maybe not Rand's father.
Yeah, did we even get that?
No, so that just was totally missing, which maybe that will come at some other time, or maybe it won't. I guess we don't know.
Yeah, they have changed up the position of a lot of those little character revelation beats to different places and then gotten to them in some other roundabout way, which makes sense. But and also we don't have, because they opened as a prologue with the Red Aja instead of the prologue from the novel, we don't have the context of Luz Theron, the first dragon, and everything. I assume that will be, they're not going to not do that scene, I bet. Like, that's going to come later in the season. I imagine one of these episodes will open with the creation of Dragonmount and him wandering through the halls and all of that context. But that struck me as the other pretty sizable change to the delivery of the story points early on. And I guess coming full circle, yeah, I mean, the casting, we said it based on the interviews before, but I really feel like these actors know who these characters are in a really good way and were really well cast into each of them. I'm actually suddenly much more sad that we're not going to have Barney Harris as Matt in season 2 because he is such a good Matt so far, I feel like feels really perfect to me in the role. And so did the other,
I momentarily forgot that until you said it. So now I'm bummed out all over again.
Which I'm hopeful that'll fit in well in that there are major character changes he go through that actually kind of make sense that his appearance would be changing as he is being sort of changed as we are seeing where we are in the book by this cursed dagger that he's carrying. But I loved Marcus Rutherford as Perrin. He just is Perrin so well. Like he embodies it. He that seriousness and sadness and like thoughtfulness that he always looks like his face is scrunched up, like processing things. And now he has some even heavier things to process of accidentally having killed his own wife in this fight with the Trollocs, which I don't know if we actually said that was what happened to her when she died, that it's by his own hand and axe. Let's see. I really like Zoe Robbins as Nynaeve, who I have hinted at as my favorite character in the books. Although she didn't really become my favorite character until probably book 2 or 3. And all these characters to me feel like we kind of said they're starting this show more at the place they end Eye of the World, I think, like with because they're a few years older and they're less like children. They have more of that growth. Nynaeve is kind of in the same place, I feel like, for the most part, but we just have more of an understanding of where she's coming from and what her relationship to the Two Rivers is and the weight that she sort of carries. and the hostility that she feels towards Moraine. I zero complaints about Rosamund Pike as Moraine. I think she's doing a wonderful job so far. Daniel Henney as Lan, I'm way into, not just because he's extremely hot and like fits into the role physically well. And even Josh Stradowski as Rand. I think he's well cast, although still probably the least interesting character of these here so far.
Yeah, but he's bland in the book as well. So in my opinion, so I felt like it was fitting to me.
Yeah.
It was,
and even the.
No, you keep going.
I was just going to say, even the small side roles, we only see Johann Myers as Padden Fane for like 2 or 3 scenes, but he felt like the moment he does that kind of like leery grin about taking advantage of Matt's stolen goods when they're doing that little exchange there, I'm like, oh my God, this guy is perfectly casted. There's something about his like huge, almost like rodent-like smile that he does that feels perfect for Padden Fane. We don't see him again in the first 2 episodes, except for when the Trollocs are attacking. He's kind of backing away with a sort of like, something's going on with him. The look on his face you see as he is just kind of like watching everything going on and not helping, not really like running away or anything, but sort of backing off. You get the sense that we're going to see him again. I feel like the camera is letting us know, even if we don't get those later scenes from the novel with him showing up again yet. And as we said, no Tom so far, who is one of my favorites as well. And we'll have to see what he's doing. Episode 2, this is where things, like I said, they did start to feel a little too rushed to me. I really missed I really like episode 2, and we get a lot of great scenes brought to life in really vivid ways from the book. Like the ferry scene, I thought was really appropriately dramatic. Really well, like, we get everything from them getting on the ferry just in time to get across the river, and then all the Trollocs showing up and one getting shoved in the water. The extremely Nazgul drama of the Fade showing up on the horse between them, and then creepily opening its enormous mouth to shriek and leer at them, and then the sinking of the ferry, which is even more amped up than in Eye of the World because it involves the ferry guy getting killed. And what I thought was a really economical way of then for them to have a conversation about the 3 oaths and what it means for like Moraine's morality and what she's willing to do at this point. Did any thoughts on any of that stuff?
Yeah, I thought
as they're having those arguments right away.
I thought the ferry scene was well done and like prompting the moral questions that kind of get brought up several times in the book. And I thought, like you said, it was clever to have the man kind of hanging on, and she essentially kills him, though she didn't want to or intend to, because it just pushes the morality question a little bit harder. Whereas, I don't know, when it's just the ferry being sunk, it's kind of obvious, like, yes, she did what had to be done. And I think that it brought the question up a little bit, in a little bit of a larger way, to have also taken the ferry captain down with his ferry. But it's still obviously what had to be done. But I like the tension that it brought there. I thought that scene was really good. And yeah, just the kind of army looming over on the other side of the river was a really strong visual.
Both for Eric and me, it was like, holy cow, right. 300 Trollocs is a lot of Trollocs. Like just getting more of the sense of what 300 of these monsters looks like. Something that we never see them more than a few at a time in the novel, really. So it's hard to get the same, until much later when they're on the plains and there's the big army chasing them, I guess. And when Moraine does the earthquake and all that before Shadar Logoth, or they're pronouncing it Shadar Logoth on the show. But we skipped all that. And that's right. We skipped Berlin. We're skipping through most of the towns and the downtime. We skipped the meeting of Min, another character I'm sad that we don't get to see showing up here early, though I'm sure she will be later. And because we skipped the towns, we have to have an encounter with the White Cloaks in the wilderness, kind of like along the road, which I thought was a pretty good way of still getting that in and condensing it visually. And interesting that that Moraine's subtlety does work in this one. She doesn't have to resort to trying to scare them off with the one power. I think one, because there's way more of the White Cloaks in the scene here. And two, because it gives a really good excuse to explain just how much she can omit and bend the truth without lying. And that whole scene, I was like, everything she's saying, I'm like, I guess that is technically true. Let me think of the ways in which that's technically true, which was fun because then Egwene, of course, right after is like confronting her about so much for not being able to break the oaths. You were lying to them. At which point Moraine explains something else I don't think we've known in Eye of the World, which is that she physically cannot break the oaths. It's not like just something that they swear to. It's something that there is bound in the one power that the Aes Sedai had to concede to not get at the end of the war with Arthur Hawkwing when the entire world was basically besieging the one tower, and that would have been the end of the Aes Sedai if they hadn't agreed to this peace where they agreed to take on these 3 oaths. The show is being I felt like pretty quick and economical about giving us lots of lore in ways that are not very long or droning. They just get it in real quick and efficiently and move on.
I felt like I didn't so much feel like any of the plot elements were particularly rushed in and of themselves. Maybe it was more just like a general pacing. Like the book has such a steady, plodding along. And like you said in the introduction, how it's like, you could be on this backpack journey through Europe and encountering all these monsters like that. That is exactly embodying the book for me. And because they have been so economical with the plot, that I do feel like the second episode, it was just like, then this, then this, then this. And I kind of missed the slowness of the journey just a little bit.
Even I just wanted, I feel like if they had just given us 10 minutes in Berlin, like a bit of rest by the fire, that would have been a place they could have introduced Tom, like entertaining the inn and then, having the first nightmare dreams there. I think that was another thing that economically switched to the wilderness. They switched the rat dream to a bat dream, which works just as well. It's just as gross and creepy for each of them to be vomiting up bats in their dream, and then the bats all being dead by the hundreds with broken necks. But I did miss something of the feeling of safety briefly, because I never once felt, and this is something Dan has mentioned later in the book, kind of the opposite. He feels like the party gets rested too often and finds like places of refuge too often. I wanted at least one in these first 2 episodes here. It's like we're kind of breakneck without like a moment of, oh my God, let's feel like we're okay briefly. But I fully appreciate how much story they have to get through. There are 14 books that they want to book through, and I assume about a season each, right? It seems at this rate, or maybe more. Maybe they'll try to do a couple books per season. And even like the getting into Shatter Logoth, we had a lot of that condensed down. We got rid of Mordeth as a character entirely. Moraine is out of commission here, which is also a thing that is changing the dynamics, that she is just unconscious for large swaths of this episode, which sort of works because she seems to not want to go into there under any cost, but Lan is like the one who makes the decision, and that's where they have to go. Sorry, one sec. I'll just make a note in myself in the call here. Dan, we're just wrapping up episode 2 real quick, and then we'll get right into the book, if that sounds good. It will take probably like five minutes more to get through. But the events we're going to talk about, the last 5 minutes, are ones that are book events. And anyway, but I'll wait to introduce you if you want to stay on quiet for the second until we finish. So we get rushed into Shatter Logoth, which looks pretty incredible and daunting here. You get the haunting sense of this abandoned city, I thought, and the fact that you get the soundtrack, as the characters note, like there's no insects, there's no birds, everything is just dead, silent. We get Mashadar, and we get rid of Mordeth, we get the dagger, all those beats happen. And what did you think of the way Mashadar or Mashadar was rendered in this one instead of the mist?
I thought it was kind of cool. In the book, I more felt like it was like the smoke monster in Lost. That's kind of how I was picturing it. And so maybe they had to change it up just so that it wasn't the smoke monster in Lost. But I thought it was creepy, and it was quick, and the way that they showed that horse kind of being like disintegrated by it.
Oh, Keely's not going to be
I
happy
know.
about that scene.
I certainly thought of Keely in that moment. I was like, not the horse, but it gave us a sense of like what this can do and what they're running from. I thought it was pretty cool. I thought that whole scene was creepy and unique. And I didn't really mind the omission of more death in that whole section because it sort of annoyed me anyway. So I thought that they spent the appropriate amount of time there and seemed to like, again, just be very efficient in getting in like exactly what needed to happen. Perry needed to get that dagger and they needed to split up the crew basically. So
yeah, it's all done like we've both been saying, efficiently, like visually, the way that Mashadar is, which is no longer a mist, which is this sort of like almost two-dimensional blackness that travels along the ground and the walls, which I thought was very cool in when the camera goes above head, like the drone shots. And it almost looks like cartoon in a good way, of like the color just draining out of the world, or like film stock burning it. And that can just physically separate them. Like they just get physically separated. There's no way through this thing because we've seen it disintegrate the horse. And it's so much clearer here that the city is whispering and entrancing and sort of bringing Matt to the dagger in a way that is not just like the idiot kids deciding, let's go exploring around this completely haunted city in the middle of the night, right? I feel like that leaves a lot more sympathy for Matt, especially than maybe those of us who hadn't read the book before felt at that point, because I was sort of making the argument, I think it's an enchantment. I think, but Jordan does not really make clear that it's something really sinister and magical going on in the way that this does with the whispers there. And we get these really, I thought, good character beats in the brief moments of camping with Rand and Egwene, having that moment of like looking over the city and that brief exchange of like what this is doing to them and their relationship and where the world is bringing them. And similarly with Perrin and Matt, and conversations about where they are and about what they've gone through and their families. And again, that stuff with Matt that I don't think you can know reading Eye of the World until Matt's perspective, like what he feels about what's been left behind. And even back to the first episode, all the scenes we get with what his relationship with his sisters is, and sort of he's sort of, portrayed as a degenerate gambler, but who also cares deeply about his family and taking care of his siblings that his parents are not really taking care about. And they're sort of his real motivation for wanting to get back there so badly. We do need to move on to the book, and Dan is just about ready to join us. Do you have any final thoughts on episode 2, or what you're hoping to see in the next episode?
I guess I don't have too much else to say. It was exciting so far, and I think it's just really interesting to see what they're doing with this work that they're able to kind of look at the larger scope of and then create a cohesive story, which is something Jordan can't really do because he wrote the books in order, I'm assuming. And it didn't have a whole, maybe he had an outline and ideas, but it's a different writing activity to be able to take this whole series of books and be like, okay, where are we gonna get all this content in? And it's exciting to see.
Yeah, that was, I had a moment near the end of episode 2 when they're like jumping off the walls of Shadar Logoth, like rather than getting past it and then getting swept in the river, where I'm like, this feels so much like it is benefiting from what you just said. This is like another draft. This is like a whole team of editors coming in and saying, okay, what if we wanted to tell this story as an action adventure story and get rid of so much of like, not always cruft, sometimes cruft, but like, what can we combine? What can we be economical with for film? And I feel like they're doing a really good job in these first 2 episodes of getting us where we need to be. We are joined now by Dan Wimble, or excuse me, sorry, Dan Katinsky. I'll edit out the little bit on there. Dan Katinsky coming on the call. Hey, Dan. And we've just wrapped up our discussion of the first 2 episodes of the show, which, Dan, I believe you're having a big watch party tomorrow, making up for not being able to get into that pre-premiere with the massive turnout at the theater. We're ready to hop right in if you are. We can get right into these chapters on the story, which align pretty well with things on the show. Last time we talked about chapters 26 to 30 of the first book in the series, The Eye of the World. Nynaeve intensified her search for her charges. Moraine once again made harsh choices, and Tom stayed behind to proverbially hold the door so that Matt and Rand could escape the Murdral. Swarms of the Dark One's beast servants descend on Perrin and Egwene, and after a temporary reprieve, they were caught by a more dangerous foe yet in the Lord Captain of the White Cloaks. Today we're digging into chapters 31 to 35, where we learn what becomes of Rand and Matt on the long road to Caemlyn. So before we dive into chapter 31, tell me what you think, you two. I think these are, of all the sets of chapters we have done, the 5 where we're in the same perspective the whole time, and these are all really of a piece. In a way, I feel like, is it more efficient to keep doing as we've been doing for these 5 chapters, our chapter by chapter recap each one and talk about, or should we just like recap all 5 of these and talk about Rand and Matt's journey to Caemlyn? What do you think? It makes more sense for the way that these are written here, because they're all about them running from Darkfriends and from village to village and getting to Caemlyn, right? Thoughts?
Yeah,
okay.
To me it seemed it was just an interesting section choice that we read because it was very cohesive. They're just like on their journey. It's Rand and Matt. They encounter lots of inns and lots of dark friends. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, an increasingly justified paranoia for Matt that kind of starts out with him being like hostile even to the people who are trying to be friendly to them, and seeming like an enormous asshole as he descends into this paranoia. That becomes increasingly justified as like almost every town they go to has dark friends waiting for them and around every corner. And it's the thing. Are you really paranoid if everyone is actually out to get you? And even the people who aren't out to get them are getting increasingly suspicious and hostile. And we get the sense that everything in the world is going pretty badly in more ways than we were necessarily aware of back in the Two Rivers. So I guess I'll quick just try to run through some of the major points of chapters 31 through 35, and then we'll just get into talking about it. In chapter 31, play for your supper. Rand and Matt are like heading east, working at farms in exchange for food or a place to sleep. They have this we get the sense they've done this with a couple families, but they earn their keep with the Grinwell family farm, which is the first point where Rand pulls out his flute and plays for their entertainment and much applause and the unwanted attention of the family's eldest daughter. We get this almost sort of very quaint thing where the reason that they're having to flee the Grinwells, where they could have stayed longer, is that they really don't want trouble with the overprotective dad about the fact that his daughter really has the hots for Rand in particular, and Rand doesn't seem like anything is going to happen, but they're really worried about getting chased out of town for this, which they kind of decide to leave preemptively. They realize that they can earn their living playing and juggling at inns instead, and that's kind of what they keep doing for the next bunch of chapters. The first big climax of which is at the inn in Four Kings, where they're beset on all sides here. The greedy innkeeper and his huge muscle goons seem like they're going to do something to try and rob them in the night, and so they're trying to sneak out of there. But that gets complicated because there's a really wealthy-looking merchant who's followed them from Whitebridge. So they're who turns out, of course, to be a dark friend, and so they're really with their backs against the wall between a rock and a hard place here. The merchant Howell Goad reveals himself as a dark friend, offers them power and status as dreadlords if they submit to the Dark One. This is where we're learning about some of the things the Dark One can offer you, like resurrection from the dead, immortality, power beyond human compare. And then there's like this really tense moment where it seems like Goad is done trying to negotiate, and he and his armed servants are going to break down the door. And then lightning strikes the inn, like right through the window with these iron bars, blasting down the door, potentially killing Goad and his goons. We really don't know, because Rand and Matt don't stick around to find out, because it blasts through the wall. They get out of there, but Matt is blinded by the lightning. They're fleeing into the rain. It's all hyper dramatic. I thought these were really, really, dark and stormy night type scenes that we got a lot of here. Lots and lots of high fantasy adventure drama, constantly escaping by the skin of their teeth. More dark friends chase him out of the next 2 inns. Sometimes it's like at one point, like a kid, basically, they're sort of thinking of him as a kid because they're starting to be forced to grow up a lot, but he's kind of their age, but he's just like a local layabouts about, like rich kid who tries to, just talk and negotiate with them, but they're fleeing. They hitch a ride on carts. They're trying to blend in with all these people by the thousands, I think we get the sense, who are flocking to see the captured false dragon Logain in Caemlyn, as most people are taking to calling him, though we learned that a lot of people don't think he's a false dragon, and there are increasingly hostile tensions between those who think he is and he's not. They random at spy a Murdral who seems to be looking for them at one point, kind of disguised in cloak, sort of like the Nazgul at the beginning of Fellowship. It's offered a reward out for them. It's telling people that they stole a heron-marked sword. They hitch a ride with a farmer who tells them all about the goings on in Caemlyn and Andor, what's going on politically and everything. They arrive in Caemlyn. They get to the inn that Tom told them to hide in. They're wowed by the city. They learn a lot about Tom's past life and about the political situation here, about the political situation in the whole kingdom of Andor, which is seeming really bad and really tenuous as it turns out. And they learn things about Queen Morghese and what Tom represented to her. So that's the lowdown. We did it all at once this time. Yeah, Katie, Dan, thoughts on these chapters and the overall arc of what we're seeing and learning throughout these here?
Let's see. I was interested in these chapters. I felt like where previously I was all into Perrin and Egwene's journey. I felt like I was really in the scenes here. So there was something captivating about what was going on and their continuous struggles. And the fact that they're both becoming, things are getting harder for Rand and Mat, and they seem to be becoming less and less able to deal with it. It seems like all these pressures are really pulling them down, physically and mentally, and they're kind of just back and forth trying to hold each other up. So I think there's a nice symbol of their friendship here, that they're not too judgmental with each other, and they are just trying to do the best they can and keep the other one alive. And I like that aspect to it.
There were a couple of scenes on that I found kind of touching in the two of them and what they said to each other in a way that I haven't felt before. About their relationship, that they're feeling we're getting more of that deepening friendship and what they share despite how awful things have become and what's happening to Mat. Sorry, I cut you off of starting something else there.
No, I agree. So I think that kind of pulled me through. I was getting a little bit okay, we're at another inn. There's another Darkfriend. So that droned a little bit. And it's interesting because I think because we see Trollocs in the very beginning of the book, and they're so fierce and scary, and so and then we see the Baalzebub guy in the dreams, and I mean, compared to those characters, the Darkfriends are just they just pale in comparison. So it's kind of these annoying gnats that just keep pestering them and trying to bring them down. And
it's almost that gnat-like thing where it's the attrition of it. It's so many days and weeks of this that they are just getting worn down physically, mentally. They're burning up with fever, both of them by the end. They're not sleeping. They're traveling all the time. There's something Matt gets blinded at the one point. This is the slow war against them going on here. And we do still have the threat of the Fade showing up at various points, though it does seem maybe we're learning the deeper we get into densely populated human civilization, maybe the less of a direct threat the Fade and the Trollocs are, and the Fade seems less able to easily find them in these crowds. So Dan, you've probably been our most vocal critic of the editorial decisions that maybe Jordan is making or making in concert with Harriet McDougal here, to have so many chapters, as Katie was just saying, of we have so you were feeling like it was a lot of in chapters before. I do get the sense in which maybe if somebody was putting this novel out in today's market, somebody would need to say, okay, Jordan, how many chapters do we need on repeating the same dynamic before it starts to feel okay, pick two, maybe, or even three, pick three Darkfriends, Jordan, and have them escalate. 3 Darkfriend scenes, and that's a good number. Maybe we don't need 5 or 6 at this point. Did you were able to appreciate these chapters at all, or are you feeling too dragged along?
It was a mixture for me because I definitely agree. He's running like he reuses the same kind of setting over and over again, and it seems to be the inn is what he gravitates back to. It's just becoming a reoccurring theme throughout. So that part is feeling a little repetitive, but at the same time, one thing I'm appreciating is the development of his characters finally.
Yeah.
So that might make it a little fresher for me because it's like finally Rand seems to be growing as a person. Like Matt is becoming a little more hostile and kind of like snappy, but like Rand seems to be maturing a little bit. He's more aware of his surroundings. He's learned how to like fend for himself. He's like playing for his like food, and he's kind of taking a role that he didn't have to before. So whereas he felt more just like a farm boy and was kind of useless and kind of dead weight for the group.
Yeah.
He's starting to like kind of pull his weight. They're both getting a little wiser about kind of being like, I think at the start of the novel, they both would have been like screwed in so many more occasions. And they're kind of starting to pick up on that. They're understanding that not everyone's friendly towards them. They're starting to be a little smarter about their choices. Matt is still probably the most foolish out of the initial Two Rivers characters. He's still making brash decisions based on how he's feeling at the moment. Like if he's hungry, he wants to eat versus like what that could kind of put them in. Whereas Rand is making decisions ahead of time based off the situation, not how he's feeling or what he's wanting. So Matt still seems to be the most immature out of the initial group. But
although
it's an interesting dynamic.
He does have the excuse of, I think at this point, being quite literally shown to be infected by whatever this dagger is doing to him, and how it's just changing. I don't know if has Rand put that together at this point. Like he knows something's wrong with Matt, but he hasn't really linked it to Shadar Logoth, even though he's said it multiple points. Ever since Shadar Logoth, Matt's been...
Yeah, they keep talking about the clutching of the dagger and how he's always having his hand on it. I wasn't actually fully sure if it was just him kind of getting more paranoid and kind of tired of like the journeying and kind of just like being on the run and sleeping out in the rain and eating scraps and all that stuff. I think we've talked about this before, the magic element or like kind of the enchantedness. I can't tell if it's just the character kind of like begrudgingly like getting snappier and kind of more irritated as they go on and getting paranoid because they're constantly getting attacked, or if it's because that all could be very natural versus like you're saying kind of like his enchanted dagger kind of changing his attitude and kind of altering his state of mind. So I don't know. I didn't fully pick up on it, whether or not it was the dagger, if he was just kind of descending into kind of a madness around their journeying and kind of that aspect of it.
I felt like I kept reading that just like Lord of the Rings, like with the ring, like when he would like stick his hand in his pocket to like feel the ring, and that was just like a sign that he was getting more and more like infected by the powers of it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I pretty firmly believe at this point, coming back to this novel, that Jordan tries to be too subtle and hold too many things back for future revelations of character. Like everything from character motivations to what is going on with magic in this world to political context of scenes. I think he's a little too fond in this first book of saving those things for like the very end of this book, things that will that we have not even gotten to yet, and then revealing things after the show, which I think it takes away some of the power when you go from being a little ambiguous and mysterious to just like not even being established at all necessarily. That I think is my main takeaway, that I think he does better in the ensuing books, like starting with the Dragon Reborn. And maybe that's also because maybe this is an editing thing or revision thing where he was discovery writing, and maybe he didn't decide a lot of these things until later in the as he's drafting this first draft later on, realizing, I'm going to have that be because of these other things that went down earlier. I don't know if we'll ever be able to tell that for sure, but maybe that will become more clear. What you said about Rand feeling savvier and wiser, we even get a thing of him realizing the one kind of questionable thing that Rand is still doing is carrying around this Heron Mark sword, which is drawing attention and speculation in a lot of places. And he has this whole thing that I noted where he's aware that he could be leaving a clear trail for the Murdral if Fades needed that kind of trail. But he has this firm belief that he can't. This is like his one link to Tam as his dad. And this, like, he knows irrational belief he has that as long as he still wears the sword, there's some connection between Tam and him that gives him the right to still call Tam his dad. To call him father. So we know that's like something that he's deeply struggling with there, which kind of feels like, it's an author patch. It's probably like something Jordan is being like, well, why is he still wearing the sword at all times? And I feel like it's a pretty solid excuse for why he has this obvious liability, which then when they get to Caemlyn, he finally like wraps up in the cloth. that he gets there.
Yeah, but that it's so funny to me because there's so many like dilemmas or like kind of situations which are done in people's heads and nobody else has been involved with that. Like nobody else has questioned like Tam being his dad except for like it's all in Bran's head. Like they've never had this discourse outside of his like conversation he's having with himself in his head.
Because everybody keeps secrets from each other.
They do, but like nobody else has like kind of challenged that view. It's only Rand thinking that. So it's kind of fascinating to me because it's all just been in his head, his back and forth there. And I don't know, some of it feels like a little irrational or like kind of strange that he's like heavily questioning this. And I get like he's getting smarter and he's realizing that he is somehow adopted or from a different past or upbringing than he actually expected.
Yeah.
It seems a little funny to me. It's just like he's constantly like, he's my dad. And like they're still doing that though. He's just like constantly like throwing that out there. Like he's very paranoid about that fact.
I was feeling similarly. Just maybe one of the times in this section when he said that, I was like, okay, yeah, who are you even arguing with at this point? Like, but I think maybe the larger issue is that nothing has happened with that plot line, like since the very beginning. Like there have been no other kinds of like clues or seeds planted or like a character saying something that triggered, I don't know. So like maybe that is the issue, is like it's a little bit dry because nothing has freshened it up.
Maybe that's why, like to our point last week, why Perrin's and Egwene's like plotline and arc is more fascinating because Bran's and Matt, it just feels kind of repetitive and kind of is following a lot of. I mean, it's a little more engaging. I like the character development. I kind of like that they're getting like wiser and starting to be able to fend. Like it's just the two of them, so we have a little bit of a different dynamic than the group.
And the main showdown, I feel like with Howl Goad and Four Kings and Shadow, pretty cool chapter, pretty exciting. I thought. A
lot more exciting, but it's like the same thing as before, just like amped up a little bit. I'm wondering, to your point, maybe it was just like an editing, or he could have gone back and was having a hard time removing those chapters. But I feel like we could have taken these ones, cut out the earlier in scenes. One aspect that had me laugh because it was just like problematic and also just kind of like almost making fun of itself was Rand pointing out that he's like, oh look, it's not a fat innkeeper this time, it's a skinny one.
My god, yeah.
I was like, is this satire on itself, though? It's like, we finally found, like, a different-looking innkeeper.
And then in chapter 35, in Caemlyn, he's vowing never to trust anyone but a fat innkeeper again.
Just like, it's that trope and kind of, like, the problematic nature of it just keeps growing into this, like, really almost, like, satire of itself. And I'm just like, what's going on here? Like, that and then like the treatment of women in the inn was a little like, it doesn't add to your liking Rand. Isn't it Rand or Matt that's like questioning why they let them do that to them or something? It's like, yeah, because everyone likes having abuse or kind of getting groped. Like that's totally the women's choice or like, yeah, I don't know. I was just like, oh, there's some cringy aspects of this chapter.
I almost felt like Jordan was trying to have Rand be the good guy in those observations by making a comment on it, but it just didn't quite work. The comment,
because he's victim blaming immediately.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it was victim blaming. It didn't work at all. Like it just like it went from like Rand has a way of doing that to all the women instead of like actually being supportive or being on their side. It turns out to be like victim blaming or kind of like nasty towards like the female characters, even if it wasn't supposed to be. It just like his thoughts come out really poorly. So I don't know if that's just like he's extremely immature and kind of a little bit sexist. I don't know.
It's a real failure of empathy here, too, given he's in a situation where they're having to do all sorts of desperate things to survive and occasionally steal stuff and all this. And he's like, gee, I can't imagine why anyone would put up with this working here. It's like, really? You can't extrapolate on the most basic level from your situation to wonder why people might put up with abuse in this town to make a living in this, and what has clearly been shown to be kind of a desperate situation for a lot of the countryside at the moment. I guess while we're still on the inns, we did have a question related to the performances they're doing at these places and the musical stuff, which we haven't really talked about much in a while, except with regard to the show earlier today, which I think is doing some interesting things with music we'll come back to. Eric writes in to ask, what's up with all these songs having different names? It's like each town we go to, they're known by another title or with alternate characters and lyrics. Is this going to be plot significant? Is it something I should be keeping track of? And if you want to write in a question like Eric, you can send it to contact@wotcast.net. Have you two had any thoughts on these, on the songs throughout these chapters? Like, for me, well, my page number wouldn't help because we're all reading different versions of the book, but where they're talking about Jolly Jame was Rhea's fling here and had been Colors of the Sun at an earlier stop. Some names stayed the same, others changed with 10 miles distance, and he had learned new songs too. And there's a whole paragraph about that again and again here. Any thoughts on Eric's question?
Yeah, my impression was I feel like every author has their indulgences, and his was, so like some authors, it's like really like spending a whole chapter describing a feast and talking about food, and it's like not relevant to the plot at all, but they enjoy writing about food and how delicious it looks and all that. So like I'm specifically thinking Redwall here.
I
like,
knew that you were subtweeting Brian Jakes.
Yeah, and just like I enjoyed the description, but it's such a fun non-plot relevant thing he does in all of his books, is like his fantasy animal series where he describes these feasts, and it's like I've grown to realize that a lot of authors have these indulgences, and my assumption was that Robert Jordan just liked music and having this element, and kind of like the songs was like a little bit of like world flavor that he'd like throwing in. So maybe it could. I don't know what's gonna be in store, but it sounds like the music aspect seems like a nice little flavor he adds to his stories that doesn't, in my opinion, I don't think it's really going to become plot significant. But Katie, curious what you were thinking there.
I thought that was a really nice response and so thoughtful. I've just gotten sick of reading the different names, so I like skip through the paragraphs, and it makes me laugh. Fair. Almost like there's like in my head, I've made it a satirical element that like, oh, here we go again with a list of song names I don't care about. But I guess ultimately I've decided it's not going to impact the plot, so that's why. Maybe it's just a token to the differences in these different places that he's traveling to, which I can understand. But I just am like sick of reading them a little bit.
It's made me like, it's made me kind of like appreciate how important music is. Like I was like thinking about this, I was like, do inns really care that much about having entertainment and music? And thinking about in the current age how like we have like DJs and we have music playing everywhere, and how we take that for granted, that we just have like MP3s you can throw on, like, and like digital sound. So I haven't seen a lot of authors use this like storytelling aspect of like, oh, in a fantasy series without like modern technology, it's like you have bards and people playing music, and you have to, like, entertainment needs to be live all the time, because
you don't even have a TV at home.
You don't have record. Yeah. So it's like their only source of entertainment aside from drinking is when these like musicians come in. So I'm like, it's kind of a fascinating aspect to me, because I'm like, I guess it would be a lot more relevant to have that if you don't have like live, like we love music and culture so much, and I think we take it for granted. We have like digital sounds and like digital music. So I found that part kind of fascinating, that they're making their way across and like kind of making up for, they have to kind of be resourceful with the skill sets Tom's given them, because they don't have the Aes Sedai just kind of throwing coins at everyone. So yeah. I found that kind of interesting. They had to like learn a trade to be able to like keep moving along and actually like stay in places, because not everyone's going to be like super like generous and giving them a free place.
Yeah, I like that narrative tool too, and I think you're right on with the historical value of live entertainment. And they even explicitly say like some of these small towns they go to, the smaller ones, may not have had anybody who could play the flute or juggle in like a year because they don't happen to have any good local singers or musicians, or people don't really have a lot of instruments. I do feel, Katie, to your feeling of like not even reading the names anymore because there's so many of them. It's maybe Jordan taking an incremental step past Tolkien, who would not just give you the names, but the full lyrics to every single one of these songs every single time they're encountered in Fellowship of the Ring. So at least maybe Jordan is sparing us he's given us a few lyrics here and there, but he doesn't give us like, next 2 pages, here's some big italicized blocks of Tolkien lyrics. The only thing I would add to all the great points you both brought up, I think we can read this particular feature that Eric brings up about the same songs having different names and different versions of the same stories in different places. I think we can generously and probably accurately also read that as a metaphor for the way this whole world seems to be in a set of cycles as people see it. That's how they conceptualize their metaphysical belief and the whole idea of the Wheel of Time and these recurring ages. They read each one as an echo of the others. New names we have learned even for things in our world, like last time we were talking about the appearance of, wait a second, King Arthur exists in the history of this world, Arthur Pendragon, and a very similar story, except with him trying to build Camelot. And instead of the witch that threatens his kingdom being Morgana or Queen Mab, or some combination of the two. In this case, it's the Aes Sedai and all that. So we have gotten hints of like new names for things in our world, and of stories and myths being repeated in different ways and vaguely similar. Like, okay, wait a minute. Satan was brought into the world at some point. There was a paradise that somebody mucked up and came in. So we have those resonances. And I think probably that's the one connection I would make. The one thing that it's doing that is bigger than just like local flavor and Jordan's own love of these songs as a setting detail. But I think that's 100% accurate, what you were saying, Dan, and what both of you were saying, that he just likes this, and it's the kind of flavor he likes, and there's probably more of it than we need throughout all these scenes here. A little bit over establishing the point. But yeah, thanks for writing in, Eric. And again, if anybody else wants to, or to comment on things, if you don't have a question per se, or to correct some of our past mistakes, and especially my past mistakes as the holder of often inaccurate lore, that's contact@wotcast.net. Anything else we should get to with this whole sequence of chapters? There's certainly a lot of reveals in Caemlyn when we do finally get there.
I thought the lightning aspect was interesting, and it's kind of like either hinting at, like, they seem to be, I can't tell, like, Matt seems to have an ability with luck, but I can't tell if it's like his luck, or like, I know Bran was also getting heated, so kind of just like in that moment, if he's pulling from a power source, or like which one of them is doing that, or if it was just completely like coincidental. But I doubt it was, and they kind of hint at like one of them being the trigger for that. But I don't know actually at the moment which one of them calls that, so curious.
Yeah, it's very unclear, I think, in that scene. It just sort of happens when things reach the highest tension there. Big flash of light, they're unconscious, and then the aftermath.
Yeah.
We get some interesting stuff about the political status of the two rivers, and like the fact that they're like, wait a second, we're in Andor, and that's part of the Queen's realm, as people are calling it. Though you could ask the age-old question, if you are not collecting taxes from a remote village in your queendom, is it actually part of your queendom? Because you're not there's not really any sense of that at this point. That things are bad for Andor. The army is barely able to maintain order and the Queen's Watch, like in the center of the kingdom, where all these refugees are swarming in. We have multiple wars going on. A lot of people not happy with the way Queen Morghese is doing everything, and a lot of people very uncomfortable with Eliada. We've heard her name before, but here's the first point, I think, where we learned that she's the royal vizier, basically. She's the advisor to Morghese, directing the way that things have gone lately. And a lot of people are not cool with that. There's something going on with different people having their weapons wrapped in red fabric versus white fabric, which we don't really know the implications of yet. Lots of talk about dragons and famine, and so many of the farmers that they travel with and other people being like, yeah, this is really bad. All the crops are dying. We don't know how we're going to survive this next winter. This last winter has barely ever ended. We got no spring really this year, and everybody's just going on as if life is normal. And the most exciting thing is this false dragon. But Queen Morghese needs to do something, because people are going to start starving en masse pretty soon if things go from bad to worse.
So to that point, and just kind of getting, because like the politics and like where they're at, like looking at the map again, because it's been a minute since I've actually like stared at this. So I have it like pulled up in front of me. I'm kind of curious that they're in Andor, where Caemlyn and both four kings are, and Whitebridge, I guess, is Whitebridge on the border? That it looks like it's in Andor. Yeah,
I think so.
It's hard to tell if the river separates it or not, but like they really haven't gotten very far. And if you look, like Tar Valon is like much further up north, so they're going. Well, I'm not sure, is east just the easiest route instead of going across the Carolyn Grass? Like, why are they going into this like territory that seems like there's a lot of politics going on? And I don't know, they're venturing east, but is that just the easiest path to get north? And like, why are they? Well, because Tom told
them to go to Caemlyn, right? And that's where they could find help and safety.
I think what Moraine said too. So I'm curious that they're all venturing to Caemlyn, and I actually don't know where are Perrin and Egwene at this point like located? Are they?
Well, because they went off the road, they got way lost. They went too far north into the wilderness, wilderness. That's sort of what happened to them, right? In those big plains you're looking at. And then when Elias shows up, he's like, yeah, you overshot Caemlyn by a lot. You're out in the middle of nowhere, and you could keep wandering and encounter nothing but wilderness until you reach the spine of the world if you keep going in this direction. So it's kind of, it's amplifying the way that, like, in this time period, and especially, like, even into the Renaissance era, going off the road between civilization is really, really dangerous. This is still a time when there are lots of wild animals all over the place, which, not really the case anymore other than deer in most of the US there. And that's where you're going to get, probably, if you wander even a little off the road, beset by bandits on the edge of the road, or starve to death, or get killed by wild animals. Like, it's like wandering off into Alaska or something, like one of the few states where you could still just accidentally wander for 1,000 miles and miss all the cities. So yeah, I think that's, and like they've sort of hinted at various points, like all roads in Andor lead to Caemlyn. So maybe the fastest and safest way to Tar Valon is through Caemlyn, like along the Queen's roads and the roads that are protected by her guards as well. And
that's looking like the only path north to get to. Like they're following the path, but it seems like there's like this open plain that they could just take. But I guess if the idea is that without a path, it's hard to kind of navigate, would make sense. But they're like going east. They keep going east further. I'm just like, I get that's like the only path on the map, but it seems to be like getting them into a lot more trouble than just kind of going up through like the fields and trying to like use the stars to navigate or something.
Well, what would they even eat or drink or anything, right? Is like the problem when you go so slowly when you have to navigate wilderness and have to carry, you have to know how far you're going, which is hundreds, if not like 1,000 miles for them. And you'd have to have supplies for all that. And odds are you're probably going to do, like what's the Into the Wild thing, or whoever that the guy in his 20-somethings was that famously like went off to try and do the wilderness trek in the American Northwest, and that even still being very dangerous today to try and do. And wound up dying as a result of the effort. It became like a movie and a famous book and some other stuff. But also, and all the lands are kind of dying too. They talk about the grass being brown, the trees bare everywhere. It's probably increasingly hard to live off the land. Though we saw Perrin and Egwene doing it for, I guess, only 2 days. Keely pointed out it seemed longer for them, and they were already kind of getting hungry. And
it definitely felt like that was drawn out a lot more.
It is interesting to look at the map. I also hadn't, just when you drew our attention to it, because they are just quite a ways from Tar Valon still.
Yeah, we're over halfway through.
Yeah,
and they're still.
I kind of thought they were closer, but I did like the last chapter in this section, chapter 35. It seemed like I don't know, it seemed like exciting and kind of like a climax to these wandering chapters that we had been reading. And when he wrapped his sword, I was like, well, he should have just done that earlier. I mean, like I understand that this is like a more customary way, but he also could have sort of thought of that just to cover up the symbol that was putting him at risk. I don't know.
Yeah, especially since he was giving thought to the sword. It does seem, it's one of those a little too convenient Jordan things. Like this solution was obvious, and the characters are being more thoughtful about that now. So why not?
Especially since he's wanting Matt to do the same, so he's like not wanting him to flash the dagger because of that handle and like the gem on it, the ruby gem. But I'm like, your handle seems to be just as flashy as the ruby gem, or not maybe as expensive, but it's like they've pointed out it's like a really flashy blade, so maybe just cover up. Like if you want the sword to be visible as like a defense, that's fine, but maybe just like wrap up your handle, or I don't know, do something to it.
And unique too, because there's hardly any of these in the world. So if the Fades are looking for somebody with a hair mark blade, although I guess that is the flip side. I forgot that part of the self-defense appeal is if people see it's a hair and mark blade, it's much more intimidating. And Rand notices people feeling like he feels like that the goons are going to attack a couple times at the inn, or that he feels like they're about to get robbed, but then somebody sees the heron and like thinks twice about it, and it's like, ugh.
Okay, that's a good justification. I'll take that.
Speaking of the Fade, the merger all going after them, I'm still curious, because it's like it's offering a reward and it's like talking to people, but like at this point we've already like, especially like seeing the trailers for the show, I don't think that's wildly off, but it's like this like white pale fleshy thing with teeth. How does anyone like converse with it or actually have? I know it's like it hides its face, but like even that, like I'm surprised anyone wants to converse or even like go after any kind of reward associated with that, or even like no one seems to like these things. So I'm surprised that like that even works as a tactic to be like putting a bounty on.
Just like in Fellowship of the Rings, it didn't work, right? The person who like heard the offer was like, yeah, I'm not trusting that creepy motherfucker. It's like, It's it's like I'm picturing he's probably on his horseback, like 10, 15 feet away on the road, dark hood over his head.
Yeah, right.
Shia Baggins. And then, the other one being like, this is, no. And like in the beginning of Fellowship, like everybody in Hobbiton's like, we're not telling you where the Baggins are. You seem creepy as hell and we don't like foreigners around here. So it's.
They like break into the inn and they have like their voices are super high pitched, like it's screeching. And Jordan describes them the same way, that's like almost like a screeching nail or something.
Yeah,
or it's like extremely like sinister and like chills them to the bone.
So I think we're seeing them not being that effectual, and that's why they have to send like the armies of dark friends after them and rely on the humans, because this is where, close enough to the core of civilization and maybe to Tar Valon as well, that the Dark One's power is at its weakest with his minions, and where even the Murdral are increasingly less effective, especially once they get to Caemlyn. And Rand is looking around, he's like, holy shit, there's thousands of people our age here. There's so many young men. Like we're it's like the jackpot of we could hide here forever. This place is incredible. We do need to wrap up and sign off on this extra long episode with our first couple of episodes of the TV show. We'll have more conversations about that next time. And then, settling into our weekly, like one episode of the show and our chapters of the book. I think it'll be a pretty manageable if you're reading and watching along, or if you're just watching along and you've not come to the books before. If you do want to read along, next time we'll be doing chapters 36 to 40. We'll learn what's become of Matt and Rand now that they've lost their guardian and are forced to... Oh, wait a second. Am I reading? That's the same recap from last time. We'll find out what happens next. That is what we learned this week. And we will continue our discussion of the third episode of the Wheel of Time TV series, which again, find the streaming on Prime. Get your episodes every Thursday night at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Other exciting news. Part 2 of our Dune bonus-sode conversation has gone live on Patreon, as I said. If you want to hear us talk about everything from Denis Villeneuve's Dune to, for reasons which will become clear, Ari Aster's Midsummer and Hereditary, 1973's The Wicker Man, Marvel's Eternals, and Alfonso Cuarón's Gravity of all things, subscribe to our Patreon at the $5 Tar Valon tier. Join the White Tower. It's a fun conversation you can be a part of as a thank you for your support, and the second of many similarly fun bonus-sodes to come. This episode of WOTCast was produced by yours truly. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Caleb Wimble. Katie, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me at katiejarvis.com and on Instagram at 30inLA.
Dan, where can people find you?
You can find me with the handle Pansy Dan with a Z instead of an S.
On Twitter and Instagram, right? On both places.
Correct.
We got on there?
Thank you. Yeah, both Twitter and Instagram.
And Keely, hope you feel better if you're listening to this. I will put your info in the show notes as always. And remember, folks, you can find all of us at WOTCast.net. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at WOTCast Podcast. And as stated, support the show at patreon.com/WOTCast. You can also support us by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your podcast platform of choice. Helps a lot. Number 2 way we find new listeners. The number 1 way is to tell a friend about the show. Word of mouth means the world to us, especially now that the TV show is going and you just know there are going to be an influx of people searching Wheel of Time on the various podcast stores, hopefully finding us, and they'll be more likely to if you're leaving those 5-star ratings, and better yet, a 5-star review telling folks what's so great about the show and about us, because I think we're doing a pretty swell job. That's all for today, folks. Thanks so much for listening. We may or may not be taking a Thanksgiving break next week before returning with the episode, or we'll have like a truncated episode depending on recording availability. But in the meantime, remember, this is not the ending. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the Wheel of Time, but this is an ending. Farewell. Did you wind up watching some of the show last
I
night?
did. We watched the first 2 episodes, which was so fun.
Okay, awesome. We watched all 3.
Nice.
I didn't realize 3 were going up.
Yeah, I was really excited.
Well, how about then we just clap and get started, and we'll just talk about the show, and then when Dan comes
Okay.
on, we'll move to the book stuff.
That sounds
since he
good.
haven't read.
Did Dan end up getting to see the premiere?
No, same thing happened to him, except they didn't even, he came with 8 other, he and his partner came with 8 other people, and they all like got turned away despite showing up half an hour early.
Damn it.
So they're doing a watch party tomorrow with all those people in like, a home theater.
Okay. That sucks. I'm so sorry that happened to you. That sucks. And you guys were 3 people away.
It's okay. We saw The French Dispatch, which was really good anyway.
Okay,
Really loved it.
good.
I like Wes Anderson movies a lot. So
Cool.
it was a good
I'll
time.
have to see that. I'm sure it was good.